My name is Miriam Fletcher, 32 years old, and until recently I was just another senior software engineer at Tech Fusion. What made me different was my uncanny ability to see vulnerabilities in AI security that others missed. I trusted my CTO Marcus, pouring my genius into our revolutionary security protocol. Then one night I overheard a conversation that shattered everything. Marcus had promised my position to his girlfriend once I delivered the finished code. What they never expected was that I had quietly patented my work for $69 million. Before I continue, where are you watching from? Hit subscribe if you've ever been underestimated at work. Trust me, what happened next is worth staying for. I graduated from MIT with a degree in computer science specializing in AI security protocols. My journey wasn't easy. As one of the few women in my program, I constantly had to prove myself. After graduation, I worked at 2 mid-sized tech companies, but neither offered the growth or innovation I craved. When the opportunity at Tech Fusion came along 3 years ago, I jumped at it. The company was known for cutting-edge security software, and I was excited to be part of something revolutionary. Tech Fusion had all the trappings of a modern tech company. Open-concept office space, ping-pong tables, free snacks, and the promise of work-life balance that never quite materialized. Still, I was passionate about the work, so the occasional late nights and weekend debugging sessions didn't bother me much. Marcus Reynolds was the chief technology officer when I joined. At first, he seemed brilliant. He had a charismatic presence that commanded attention in meetings, and initially he appeared to value my contributions. He had a reputation for spotting talent, and I felt flattered when he took a special interest in my work. He was tall, polished with salt and pepper hair that gave him an air of authority. He dressed in expensive clothes that suggested success, and he drove a Tesla that he parked prominently in the executive lot. "Miriam, your approach to the Patterson account security issue was inspired," he told me after my first big win at the company. "I think you have a future here." His words had meant everything to me at the time. About 6 months into my tenure, Marcus started dating Elaine Winters, another software engineer from our department. Elaine was relatively new to the field, having switched careers after working in marketing. She was attractive and charming, but her technical skills were basic at best. Still, she advanced quickly under Marcus's mentorship, moving up to team leader within months, despite more qualified candidates being available. I had one true ally at Tech Fusion. Bethany Thompson worked in HR and had become a friend after we bonded at a company retreat. She was warm and genuine, with a straight-talking manner that I appreciated in the often politically charged atmosphere of the tech world. "Watch yourself with Marcus," she warned me over lunch one day about a year after I started. "He's all sunshine until he isn't. I've seen how he operates." I should have paid more attention to her warning, but I was too caught up in my work to notice the office politics. Richard Davis was our CEO, a visionary who had built Tech Fusion from the ground up. He was brilliant when it came to business strategy, but often too removed from day-to-day operations to notice the undercurrents in the company culture. He traveled frequently, securing deals and partnerships, leaving Marcus to run the technical side of things. Everything changed 18 months ago when Richard announced our most ambitious project yet. Tech Fusion would develop a revolutionary security protocol for financial institutions that would protect against the newest generation of quantum computing threats. The project was potentially worth millions, and to my surprise and delight, Marcus appointed me as the lead developer. "Your background in quantum-resistant algorithms makes you perfect for this," he said. "I expect great things." The project was challenging but exhilarating. I worked 16-hour days building something truly innovative. My approach combined traditional encryption methods with a neural network that could adapt to new threats in real time. It was unlike anything on the market, and as the months progressed, I realized I was creating something of significant value. There were subtle warning signs about Marcus that I initially dismissed. The way he would slightly reword my ideas in meetings to make them sound like his own. How he would introduce me to investors as one of our talented coders rather than the project lead. The fact that he insisted on being included in all communications about the project, but contributed little actual input. 6 months into the project, I attended a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco. During a panel discussion, a lawyer specializing in tech patents mentioned the importance of protecting intellectual property, especially in joint company projects. Something clicked for me then. I realized that despite TechFusion's resources, the core innovation of our security protocol was entirely my creation. After the conference, I consulted privately with a patent attorney. She confirmed what I suspected. While employed inventions typically belong to the company, my specific algorithm could potentially be patentable separately, especially given the unique approach I had developed largely on my own time. Document everything, the attorney advised. Dates, specific contributions, any work done outside normal hours, and file as soon as possible. I spent weekends meticulously documenting my process and preparing the patent application. I didn't tell anyone at TechFusion, not even Bethany. It wasn't about stealing from the company. I planned to license the technology to TechFusion fairly. It was about protecting myself in an industry where I had seen too many brilliant minds. Particularly women have their work appropriated by others. The patent process was complex and expensive. I drained my savings and took out a loan to cover the costs. There were detailed technical descriptions to prepare, claims to draft, and legal fees to pay. But 4 months before the project's completion date, I received confirmation that my patent application had been filed. It was a security blanket. Nothing more, I told myself. Just in case. As the project neared completion, the atmosphere at work began to shift. Marcus started requesting more detailed documentation of everything I did. He began scheduling regular meetings with Elaine about knowledge transfer regarding my project, despite her not being on the team. It's just standard procedure, he assured me. We need redundancy in our knowledge base. I nodded and complied, but a sense of unease began to grow. I started keeping copies of all my work on a separate, secure drive, backing up everything religiously. Just in case. The project was 90% complete, and we were ahead of schedule. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I found myself unable to shake a growing sense of foreboding. Something was coming. I just didn't know what. The first clear sign that something was wrong came during a department meeting. I was presenting the latest progress on the security protocol when Marcus interrupted me mid-sentence. What Miriam is trying to explain, he said, smiling at the room, is that we've implemented my adaptive response algorithm to handle potential quantum computing attacks. My adaptive response algorithm, I had developed that solution during a weekend coding marathon in my apartment, fueled by nothing but coffee and determination. Marcus had never even seen it until I presented the finished code. I opened my mouth to correct him, but the moment passed as he smoothly continued the presentation. Afterward, I approached him in the hallway. That adaptive response solution was my work, I said quietly. Of course, Miriam, he replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. We're all a team here. No need to be territorial about specific features. That night, I added the incident to my growing documentation file. The next week, Elaine began stopping by my desk regularly, asking detailed questions about the project architecture. Marcus thought I should familiarize myself with what you're doing, she explained, twirling a strand of her perfectly highlighted hair. He thinks it's important for more than one person to understand the system thoroughly. Her questions became increasingly specific, focusing on the most innovative aspects of my work. Each time she would jot down notes in a small leather-bound notebook, nodding, as if she understood concepts that had taken me years to master. Meanwhile, my workload continued to increase. Marcus added just one more feature to the requirements every few days, pushing the boundaries of what was possible within our timeline. I was working 60-hour weeks while watching my creation slowly being pulled from my grasp. During this time, Bethany invited me for coffee outside the office. Her expression was serious as we settled at a table in a cafe 2 blocks from TechFusion. I heard something you should know about, she said, her voice low. There's talk about reorganizing your department after the security project is completed. My stomach tightened. What kind of reorganization? The kind where people get moved around or out, she replied. I don't have details, but I think you should prepare yourself. Marcus has been having a lot of closed-door meetings with the executive team. I thanked her for the warning, but inside my anxiety was skyrocketing. That evening, I reviewed my employment contract and the company's intellectual property policies. Everything seemed standard for the industry, but I was grateful I had filed that patent application. The following Monday, I noticed Marcus watching me from his glass-walled office as I coded. Whenever I looked up, he would quickly glance away. Later that day, he called me in for a progress report. "We need to accelerate the timeline," he announced. "Richard wants a demo for potential investors in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? That's impossible. We still have major components to test and integrate. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," he said dismissively. "Oh, and I've asked Elaine to assist you. She'll need full access to the codebase." "Marcus, adding someone new at this stage will slow us down, not speed things up," I protested. "That's not your decision to make, Miriam," he said, his tone suddenly cold. "Elaine starts tomorrow. Make sure she has everything she needs." As predicted, Elaine's help was anything but helpful. She asked endless questions, made minor changes that created bugs, and constantly reported back to Marcus. My productivity plummeted as I spent hours fixing her mistakes and explaining basic concepts. One morning I arrived early to find Elaine at my desk scrolling through my project files. "What are you doing?" I demanded. She jumped slightly, then composed herself. "Marcus asked me to check something in the authentication module. He gave me your password." He gave her my password that violated every security protocol in the company handbook. I changed all my passwords immediately and reported the incident to IT, framing it as a potential security concern rather than an accusation against Marcus. The IT director, Kenneth Williams, looked troubled. "I'll look into it," he promised. But nothing came of it. When I followed up a few days later, he avoided my gaze. "There must have been a misunderstanding," he muttered. The pressure continued to mount. I was sleeping barely 4 hours a night. My diet consisted of whatever snacks were available in the office kitchen, and the constant stress was taking its toll on my health. Despite everything, the project was coming together. My security protocol was working even better than anticipated, adapting to simulated attacks with remarkable efficiency. During this time, I overheard snippets of conversation that made my blood run cold. 2 senior engineers discussing how Marcus has big plans for the security protocol, and Elaine's going to move up once this launches. They fell silent when they noticed me nearby. The final straw came during a presentation to the executive team. I had prepared for days, ready to showcase the innovative aspects of the security protocol. But when I arrived at the conference room, Marcus informed me that he would be giving the presentation. "You look exhausted, Miriam," he said with feigned concern. "I don't want you to stress about this. I've got it covered." I sat silently fuming as Marcus presented my work as if it were his own vision. Elaine was there too, chiming in at key points, clearly familiar with the presentation I had created. Richard Davis seemed impressed, nodding along as Marcus outlined the potential market impact. After the meeting, Richard briefly stopped me in the hallway. "Great work on this project, Melissa," he said, not even getting my name right. "Marcus speaks highly of the team effort." I managed a tight smile, but inside I was screaming. Team effort. I had poured my soul into this project while Marcus plotted behind my back. As I watched him and Elaine leave together laughing about something, a horrible realization dawned on me. I wasn't just being sidelined. I was being set up to be pushed out entirely once the project was complete. That night I stayed late at the office, determined to document everything and secure backups of my work. Little did I know that this late night would lead to the conversation that would change everything. It was nearly 11 o'clock at night. The Tech Fusion office was almost deserted, most of the overhead lights dimmed to their evening setting. I had been working non-stop on finalizing the last security module, determined to complete it perfectly, despite the tension and suspicion growing around me. My eyes burned from staring at the screen for too long, and my third cup of coffee had long since gone cold beside my keyboard. I finally hit save on the completed code, allowing myself a moment of pride despite everything. This security protocol was revolutionary. It was the best work I had ever done, regardless of whether Marcus and the company would ever acknowledge that fact. I stretched, deciding to head home for a few hours of sleep before returning to begin the documentation. As I packed up my laptop, I heard voices coming from the main conference room down the hall. The sound was unusual at this hour. Most people had left by 7, except for a few dedicated engineers, who tended to work with headphones on in the development pit. Curious, I moved quietly toward the sound. The door to the conference room was ajar, a slice of light spilling into the darkened hallway. I recognized the voices immediately. Marcus and Elaine. I froze, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like an intense conversation, but then I heard my name. Once Miriam delivers the final code next week, how soon can we implement the transition? Elaine asked. I stood motionless in the shadows, my heart suddenly pounding. Almost immediately, Marcus replied, his voice casual, as if they were discussing lunch plans rather than my career. I've already spoken to Richard about reorganizing the department. He's on board with my recommendations. And he has no idea that Miriam did most of the work. Elaine's voice had a hint of concern. Marcus laughed. Richard is too busy looking at profit projections to care about who wrote what code. All he knows is that I've been leading the project and that you've been an essential part of the development team. My hands clenched into fists as I continued listening, unable to move. So when do I officially get her position? Elaine asked. I'm thinking we keep her on just long enough to finish all the documentation and do a full knowledge transfer, Marcus said, maybe 3 weeks post-completion. We'll tell her it's a restructuring decision, nothing personal. Standard corporate procedure. What if she makes trouble? She's not stupid, Marcus. There was a pause, and I could almost picture Marcus's dismissive wave. What can she do? The IP belongs to the company. She signed the same employment agreement as everyone else. Besides, who would believe her over me? I've been cultivating relationships with the board for years. The timing couldn't be better. Elaine continued, excitement creeping into her voice, especially with the investor interest. Did they really value the protocol at $69 million? Potentially more, Marcus replied smugly. The quantum security market is exploding. This puts Tech Fusion at the forefront, and me as the visionary who made it happen. Richard already mentioned the possibility of a significant bonus structure. For us, you mean? Elaine said with a laugh that made my stomach turn. Of course, I'm thinking a nice vacation might be in order after this launches. Perhaps Bali, you'd look amazing on the beach. They continued talking, discussing their plans, my replacement, the recognition they would receive for my innovation. I stood frozen, a strange ringing in my ears, as the full reality of their betrayal washed over me. Everything clicked into place, the increased documentation requirements, Elaine's constant questions, Marcus taking over presentations. It had all been leading to this moment when they would push me out and claim my work as their own. I backed away silently, careful not to make a sound. My mind was racing, processing what I had just heard, while trying to contain the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Somehow I made it to the elevator and down to the parking garage without encountering anyone else. Inside my car, the dam finally broke. Tears of anger and betrayal streamed down my face as I gripped the steering wheel. How could I have been so naive? All those late nights, the sacrifices, the brilliant solutions I had created, all of it was about to be stolen from me by a mediocre man and his equally mediocre girlfriend. The injustice of it burned like acid in my chest. I don't remember the drive home. Somehow I navigated the nearly empty streets on autopilot, my mind replaying fragments of their conversation. When I finally reached my apartment, I paced the living room for hours, unable to sleep, unable to sit still. The pain of betrayal morphed slowly into something else. Determination. Resolve. A cold, clear certainty that I would not allow them to succeed. By dawn, my eyes were dry, and my mind was sharp despite the lack of sleep. I remembered the patent application I had filed months ago. At the time, it had been a precaution, an insurance policy I never thought I would need to use. Now it was my only leverage. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to my patent attorney, Diana Adams. We needed to talk as soon as possible. I also began gathering evidence. Emails showing my contributions. Timestamps on code commits proving I was the author of key components. Documentation of Marcus's recent behavior. Screenshots of the project repository history. As the sun rose over the city, casting long shadows across my apartment floor, I made a promise to myself. This would not end the way Marcus and Elaine had planned. They thought they held all the cards, but they had no idea what was coming. The game was far from over. The following morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in my 3 years at Tech Fusion. I couldn't face Marcus or Elaine, yet not until I had a plan. As soon as the hour was reasonable, I called Diana Adams, the patent attorney who had helped me file my application months earlier. Miriam, this is unexpected. How are things progressing with your security protocol? Diana's voice was warm but professional. That's actually why I'm calling. I need to meet with you today if possible. There's been a development. I kept my voice steady though inside I was still reeling from the previous night's discovery. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Diana's sleek downtown office explaining everything that had happened. Diana listened intently, occasionally taking notes, her expression growing more serious as I recounted the conversation I had overheard. So essentially, your CTO and his girlfriend are planning to push you out and take credit for your patented work, she summarized when I finished. Work that potentially has a $69 million valuation. Exactly. What are my options? Diana pulled out a file, my patent application, and placed it on the desk between us. First, let's check the status of your application. She typed rapidly on her computer, accessing the patent database. After a moment, she looked up with a smile that transformed her serious demeanor. Miriam, this is excellent timing. Your patent was approved last week. The official notification is probably still in the mail. A wave of relief washed over me. So I actually own the patent now. Yes. For the specific algorithm and methodology you developed, you are now the legal patent holder. The company may have some rights to use the technology since you developed it while employed there, but they cannot claim to have invented it or license it to others without your permission. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing my employment contract, the patent specifications, and planning a strategy. Diana also recommended bringing in Jacob Rosenberg, an employment attorney she had worked with on similar cases. This won't be simple, Diana cautioned. Companies fight hard in intellectual property disputes, and your CTO sounds like the type who will try to discredit you personally when confronted. I'm prepared for that, I said with more confidence than I felt. By late afternoon, I had a clear action plan. First, secure my evidence and personal belongings from the office. Second, prepare a presentation for the CEO and board that would clearly establish my ownership of the patented technology. Third, consult with Jacob on the specific employment aspects to ensure I wasn't violating my contract. I returned to TechFusion that evening when I knew Marcus would be at a client dinner. Using my keycard, I entered quietly and went straight to my desk. I removed personal items and made sure all my important files were backed up securely. As I was preparing to leave, Bethany spotted me from across the office. Miriam, I thought you were sick today. Her concerned face appeared at my cubicle entrance. I hesitated, then decided to trust her with a partial truth. I needed some time to think. Bethany, do you remember warning me about Marcus last year? She nodded slowly. You were right. I overheard him and Elaine last night. They're planning to push me out once I finish the security protocol project. Bethany's expression hardened. That snake. I've heard rumors about him doing this before, but never had proof. She lowered her voice. What are you going to do? I have a plan, but I can't share details yet. Just know that if people start asking questions about me in the next few days, I could use an honest character witness. She squeezed my arm. You've got it. Whatever you need. The next day, I returned to work as if nothing had happened. I smiled at Elaine when she stopped by with her usual barrage of questions. I nodded respectfully at Marcus during the morning stand-up meeting, but underneath my calm exterior, I was methodically executing my plan. During lunch, I met with Jacob Rosenberg at a cafe several blocks from the office. He reviewed my employment agreement and confirmed Diana's assessment. The patent gives you significant leverage, he agreed. But we need to be strategic about how we present this. Your goal is not just to protect your intellectual property, but also your professional reputation. Together, we crafted a formal letter, asserting my rights as the patent holder and outlining the potential licensing terms for TechFusion to legally use my technology. Jacob also prepared documentation for potential wrongful termination claims if they tried to fire me in retaliation. That evening, I sent an email to Richard Davis, requesting a private meeting the following day. To my surprise, he responded personally, within minutes, agreeing to see me before the scheduled executive presentation of the completed security protocol. I spent that night preparing my presentation. I created slides showing the development timeline highlighting my specific contributions. I included documentation proving I was the sole creator of the core algorithm. I prepared a simple explanation of the patent and its implications that even non-technical executives could understand. And most importantly, I practiced maintaining my composure, no matter how Marcus might react. As I rehearsed in front of my bathroom mirror, I realized something had changed within me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they had been channeled into a cold, clear purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every talented person who had been stepped on or had their work stolen by someone with more power or connections. It was about setting a precedent. The next morning, I dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit that I reserved for important client meetings. I arrived at the office early, ready for my private meeting with Richard. As I waited outside his office, I saw Marcus walking down the hallway, a confident smile on his face. He nodded at me casually, completely unaware that his carefully constructed plan was about to crumble. Richard's assistant ushered me in precisely at 9 o'clock. The CEO looked up from his desk with a distracted smile. Miriam Wright, Marcus's coding expert. What can I do for you this morning? I've only got about 15 minutes before the big presentation. I took a deep breath and placed a folder on his desk. Actually, sir, that's exactly what I need to discuss with you. There's something important you should know before that presentation begins. The executive boardroom at Tech Fusion was designed to impress with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a massive mahogany table that could seat 20 and state-of-the-art presentation equipment. By 10 o'clock, the room was filled with the company's top executives, several board members and representatives from 2 potential investor groups. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching as Marcus worked the room. He moved confidently from one executive to another, shaking hands and sharing jokes. Elaine stood nearby, looking polished and professional, in an expensive suit, nodding attentively as Marcus introduced her to key stakeholders. Richard Davis entered last, giving me a long, measured look before taking his seat at the head of the table. Our earlier meeting had been brief but consequential. He had listened to my claims with initial skepticism that gradually transformed into concerned attention. I had shown him the patent documentation, but not my full presentation, leaving him with more questions than answers. He had promised to let the scheduled presentation proceed, but assured me I would have an opportunity to speak. Let's get started, Richard announced, bringing the room to attention. We're here for the final presentation of Tech Fusion's next-generation security protocol. Marcus, I believe you and your team are ready to show us what you've developed. Marcus stepped to the front of the room, his presentation already displayed on the large screen behind him. Thank you, Richard. Today represents the culmination of 18 months of groundbreaking work in quantum-resistant security protocols. He launched into a well-rehearsed presentation, outlining the security challenges posed by quantum computing and the revolutionary approach his team had developed to address them. The executives nodded appreciatively, clearly impressed by what they were seeing. And I'd like to acknowledge the contributions of Elaine Winters. Marcus continued, gesturing for Elaine to join him at the front. Her insights were instrumental in developing the adaptive response algorithm that forms the core of this solution. Elaine smiled modestly. Thank you, Marcus. It was certainly a challenging problem to solve. I felt my face grow hot as I watched them take credit for my work, my innovation, my countless hours of effort. But I remained silent, waiting for my moment. Marcus continued with the technical demonstration, showing how the security protocol responded to simulated attacks. It worked perfectly, exactly as I had designed it to. He then moved on to the business implications. Based on market analysis and preliminary interest from financial institutions, we're looking at a potential valuation of $69 million for this technology in its first year alone. Excited murmurs spread around the table as the executives and investors processed the number. And I'm pleased to announce, Marcus continued, that as we move into the implementation phase, Elaine will be taking over as lead engineer on the project. Her technical expertise and vision make her the ideal person to guide this technology into the marketplace. Richard cleared his throat. Before we continue, I believe Miriam Fletcher has something to add to this presentation. He nodded in my direction. Miriam, please go ahead. The room fell silent as I stood up. Marcus looked confused, then concerned as I connected my laptop to the presentation system. Thank you, Richard. I began, my voice steadier than I expected. While Marcus has done an excellent job explaining the potential of this security protocol, there are some important facts that have been omitted. I clicked to my first slide, which showed the original project assignment with my name clearly listed as lead developer. 18 months ago, I was tasked with developing this security protocol from concept to implementation. I have led this project from day one. Marcus interrupted, his voice tight. Miriam was certainly an important member of the development team, but this was a collaborative effort under my direction. Was it? I asked, clicking to the next slide. This one showed the repository commit history with my name on over 90% of the code contributions. The records show that I personally wrote nearly all of the code for this project, including the entire adaptive response algorithm that was just credited to Elaine. Elaine's face flushed red. One of the board members leaned forward, frowning. That's a technicality, Marcus said dismissively. As CTO, I provided the vision and oversight. The actual coding is just implementation. Vision and oversight, I repeated slowly. Like this email from last April where you asked me to explain how the core algorithm works because you didn't understand it. I displayed the email on screen and several executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus's composure began to crack. Richard, this is inappropriate. Miriam is clearly upset about the restructuring plans. But this isn't the forum to air personal grievances. Actually, I continued calmly, this is exactly the right forum because what we're discussing directly impacts the $69 million valuation you just mentioned. I clicked to my next slide, which displayed my patent certificate. This is United States Patent Number 9876543, granted to me personally last week. It covers the core adaptive response algorithm that makes this security protocol unique and valuable. The room erupted in confused conversation. Richard stood up, calling for order. Miriam, are you claiming you personally hold a patent on technology developed for Tech Fusion? He asked, though I knew from our earlier meeting that he already understood the situation. Yes, I am. I developed the core algorithm largely on my own time, documented the process meticulously, and filed for patent protection 4 months ago. The patent was granted last week. Marcus's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is absurd. Company policy clearly states that all intellectual property developed by employees belongs to Tech Fusion. Not in this case, I replied, nodding to Diana Adams, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the room and now stood up. My attorney can explain the legal details, but essentially, while Tech Fusion has certain usage rights as my employer, I am the legal owner of this patented technology. Diana stepped forward, introducing herself and briefly outlining the legal position. The board members listened intently, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. Furthermore, I continued. Once Diana had finished, I have evidence that Marcus and Elaine were planning to take credit for my work and remove me from the project once it was completed. I played a recording from my phone, a conversation I had secretly taped with Marcus earlier in the week, where he discussed transitioning me off the project and having Elaine take over. Elaine stood up abruptly. I had no idea about any patent issues. Marcus assured me that everything was being handled properly. That's not true, Marcus snapped at her. Don't try to distance yourself now. The potential investors exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding drama. One of them leaned over to whisper something to Richard. I think we need to take a short break, Richard announced, his voice firm. Executives and board members will reconvene in the small conference room. Marcus, Elaine, and Miriam, please wait here. As the room emptied, Marcus turned on me, his face contorted with anger. You've just committed career suicide. No one hires troublemakers in this industry. I met his gaze steadily. I'd rather be known as a troublemaker than a thief. We sat in tense silence for nearly 45 minutes before Richard returned, accompanied by 2 board members and the company's legal counsel. Their expressions were grave. After reviewing the information presented, Richard began. The board has decided to place both Marcus and Elaine on administrative leave pending a full investigation into this matter. Miriam, we would like you to continue leading the security protocol project, reporting directly to me for the time being. Marcus jumped to his feet. This is outrageous. I built the security division of this company. Sit down, Marcus, one of the board members said quietly. Or security will escort you from the building right now. The look of shock on Marcus's face as his carefully constructed world began to crumble was something I would never forget. It wasn't joy I felt in that moment, but rather a profound sense of justice being served. As security arrived to escort Marcus and Elaine to clean out their desks, Richard turned to me. "Miriam, we have a lot to discuss about the future of this project and your patent. Would you be available for a meeting tomorrow morning?" "Yes," I replied. "I think that would be a good idea." The confrontation I had dreaded for days was over, but as I gathered my materials and prepared to leave the boardroom, I knew that the real work of rebuilding my career and repositioning the security protocol was just beginning. Still, for the first time in months, I left the office that evening feeling like I could breathe again. The next morning, Tech Fusion was buzzing with rumors. As I walked through the office to my desk, conversations stopped and heads turned. Some colleagues quickly looked away, embarrassed or uncertain how to react. Others offered small smiles or nods of acknowledgement. Word had spread quickly about the dramatic confrontation in the executive boardroom, though most people only knew fragments of the full story. Bethany was waiting by my desk with 2 cups of coffee. "I heard what happened," she said, handing me one of the cups. "The whole company is talking about it." "I'm not surprised," I replied, taking the coffee gratefully. It wasn't exactly a subtle exit for Marcus and Elaine. Security walked them out. Marcus was apparently shouting about lawsuits the whole way to the elevator. Bethany lowered her voice. "Richard called an emergency board meeting last night that went until after midnight. Janet from Executive Admin said they're doing a full audit of all of Marcus's projects." Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Richard's assistant asking me to come to his office immediately. When I arrived, I found not just Richard, but 3 board members and the company's head of legal waiting for me. "Miriam, please sit down," Richard said, gesturing to the empty chair. His expression was serious but not hostile. "We've been reviewing the situation through the night, and we have some questions." For the next 2 hours, I answered their questions about the security protocol, my patent application process, and my interactions with Marcus and Elaine. I showed them additional evidence I had gathered, including emails and documentation that supported my claims. The company lawyers asked particularly pointed questions about whether I had used company resources when developing the patented algorithm. "I can provide my home computer records showing when I worked on the core components," I explained. "The basic framework was developed during company time, but the innovative elements that make it patentable were created during evenings and weekends on my own equipment." By the end of the meeting, the tension in the room had noticeably decreased. Richard leaned back in his chair, exchanging glances with the board members. "Miriam, we owe you an apology," he said finally. "It's clear that Marcus was systematically taking credit for your work while planning to remove you from the project. That's not how Tech Fusion is supposed to operate." "Thank you," I said simply. "We'd like to propose a way forward," Richard continued. "The company respects your patent ownership. We'd like to negotiate a formal licensing agreement that fairly compensates you while allowing Tech Fusion to bring this technology to market. Would you be open to those discussions?" "Yes, I would," I replied, feeling a weight lifting from my shoulders. As I left the meeting, my phone was flooded with notifications. News of the situation had somehow leaked to the tech press. An article on TechCrunch speculated about turmoil in Tech Fusion's leadership following the abrupt departure of the CTO. My name wasn't mentioned, but industry insiders would quickly connect the dots. Over the next few days, the fallout continued to spread. The board launched a formal investigation, interviewing team members who had worked with Marcus. What they discovered was disturbing. I wasn't the only one whose work Marcus had appropriated. At least 3 other engineers came forward with similar stories, though none had the foresight to protect themselves as I had done. Elaine tried desperately to distance herself from Marcus. She sent me an email claiming she had been manipulated and had no idea about his plans to push me out. I didn't respond. The evidence in my possession clearly showed her willing participation. Tech Fusion's stock price took a hit as rumors swirled about the leadership chaos. Richard was forced to issue a statement to investors acknowledging the departure of the CTO, but emphasizing the company's strong pipeline of innovation. Behind the scenes, damage control was in full swing. A week after the confrontation, I was summoned to another meeting with Richard and the board. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. They had completed their initial investigation and made some decisions. Marcus and Elaine have both been terminated for cause, Richard informed me. We found evidence of similar behavior dating back years. Marcus apparently had a pattern of identifying talented engineers, extracting their best ideas, and then marginalizing or removing them once he had what he needed. One of the board members, Janet Harrington, leaned forward. We've also discovered that Marcus was planning to take the security protocol to a competitor once it was completed. He had been in secret discussions with them for months. The revelations stunned me. Marcus's betrayal went even deeper than I had imagined. In light of all this, Richard continued, we'd like to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer at Tech Fusion. The offer was unexpected. I'm honored, I replied carefully, but I'm an engineer, not an executive. You've demonstrated more leadership and integrity than Marcus ever did, Janet said. We need someone like you to rebuild trust in the technical team. Of course, we'd provide executive coaching and support during the transition. I asked for time to consider the offer, which they readily granted. As news of my potential promotion spread through the company, I began receiving emails and messages from colleagues I barely knew sharing their own experiences with Marcus and expressing support for my leadership. Meanwhile, my patent had attracted attention beyond Tech Fusion. 3 other major tech companies reached out through Diana, expressing interest in licensing discussions. The $69 million valuation that had seemed impressive in the boardroom presentation now looked like it might be a conservative estimate. The most surprising contact came from Kenneth Williams, the IT director who had brushed off my security concerns about Elaine accessing my computer. He asked to meet privately at a coffee shop near the office. I owe you an apology, he said, looking genuinely remorseful. When you reported the password issue, Marcus pressured me to ignore it. He implied he could have me fired if I made a big deal about it. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because the company needs to change, he replied. And if you're going to be CTO, I want you to know you can count on me to do the right thing going forward. The industry fallout continued as well. Marcus attempted to secure a position at a competing firm, but the story of his misconduct had spread through informal channels. No one would touch him. Elaine fared slightly better, landing a junior position at a startup, though at a significant pay cut. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from Richard with the subject line, Investor meeting tomorrow, your presence requested. The message was brief, asking me to prepare a short presentation on the future development roadmap for the security protocol. When I arrived at the meeting the next day, I was surprised to find representatives from one of the largest venture capital firms in the country. They had been in discussions with Tech Fusion before the Marcus situation erupted and had temporarily pulled back. Now they were ready to re-engage, but with conditions. We've been impressed by what we've heard about you, Miss Fletcher, said the lead investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Reeves, particularly your integrity in a difficult situation. We'd like to hear your vision for this technology directly. For the next hour, I outlined my ideas for expanding the security protocol into a comprehensive suite of quantum-resistant security solutions. The investors asked tough technical questions that demonstrated they had done their homework. By the end of the presentation, Victoria was nodding appreciatively. This is exactly what we were hoping for, she told Richard afterward. We're prepared to move forward with the funding round we discussed, with one adjustment. We want assurances that Miss Fletcher will remain involved with the technology development for at least 3 years. As I left that meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Bethany. Have you seen your emails? It's happening again. I quickly checked my inbox to find dozens of messages from recruiters and executives at other tech companies. Word had spread about my patent and my stand against Marcus. Suddenly, I was being courted by companies that wouldn't have given me a second glance a month earlier. It was a strange feeling to be suddenly in demand after years of having my contributions minimized, but as I considered my options, I kept coming back to Tech Fusion. Despite everything that had happened, this was where my code lived, where my security protocol was taking shape. And now, I had the opportunity to reshape the company culture as CTO to ensure that what happened to me wouldn't happen to other talented engineers. That evening, I called Richard and accepted the CTO position with conditions of my own. I wanted a complete restructuring of how intellectual property was managed and credited. I wanted a mentorship program for junior engineers, particularly women and minorities in tech. And I wanted a seat on the board where I could influence company direction at the highest level. To my surprise, he agreed to all my conditions without hesitation. We nearly lost the most valuable innovation in company history because of Marcus's ego, he said. The board is committed to not making that mistake again. As I hung up the phone, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, certainly. Pride in what I had accomplished, but also a heavy responsibility for the path ahead. The battle with Marcus was over, but the real work of creating lasting change was just beginning. 6 months after the dramatic boardroom confrontation, I stood at the podium in TechFusion's largest conference room, addressing the entire company at our quarterly all-hands meeting. The room was packed with remote employees joining via video conference. As Chief Technology Officer, these meetings were now part of my regular duties, though public speaking was still something I was growing into. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we finalized the licensing agreement for our quantum-resistant security protocol, I told the assembled employees. After extensive negotiations, we've secured a deal that values the technology at $75 million, exceeding our initial projections. Applause filled the room. The journey to this moment had been long and challenging, but the results spoke for themselves. TechFusion's stock had rebounded strongly after an initial dip, and we were now positioned as industry leaders in quantum security solutions. After the meeting, Richard pulled me aside. The board is thrilled with the licensing deal, he said. Your patent ownership turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The terms are much more favorable than what we could have negotiated otherwise. I nodded, reflecting on the irony. Had Marcus not attempted to steal my work, I might never have filed for that patent. His betrayal had ultimately led to the greatest success of my career. The aftermath of Marcus and Elaine's departure had been challenging for the company. The investigation revealed that Marcus had created a toxic culture within the technology department, fostering competition rather than collaboration and taking credit for others' innovations as a matter of routine. Several talented engineers who had left the company over the years reached out after hearing about his termination, sharing similar stories of having their work appropriated. As the new CTO, my first priority had been to heal those wounds and rebuild trust. I implemented a clear attribution policy for all technical contributions, ensuring that engineers received proper credit for their innovations. We revised the company's intellectual property agreements to be more balanced, providing financial incentives for employees whose work led to patents or significant market advantages. The licensing negotiations for my security protocol had been complex but ultimately rewarding. TechFusion received exclusive implementation rights, while I retained ownership of the core patent and received both an upfront payment and ongoing royalties. The agreement was structured to align our interests, ensuring that both the company and I benefited from the technology's success. With my newfound financial security, I established a scholarship fund for women in computer science focusing on areas of security and encryption. The first recipients had already been selected, 5 brilliant young women who reminded me of myself at the beginning of my career. Marcus, meanwhile, had faded into obscurity. After being rejected by several major tech companies, he had taken a position with a small startup overseas, far from the influence he once wielded. Elaine had eventually left the industry altogether, unable to escape the shadow of the scandal. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a sense that justice had been served. My office door opened and Bethany poked her head in. Now serving as Chief People Officer, she had been instrumental in helping me rebuild the company culture. Ready for your 1 o'clock, she asked. The new engineering hires are waiting in the orientation room. I nodded, gathering my notes. Each month, I personally welcome new technical employees, sharing not just information about our projects, but also the values that now defined our engineering culture: integrity, collaboration, and recognition for all contributions. As I walked through the office, I passed the wall we had installed in the main lobby, displaying the names and photos of key contributors to each of our major products. It was a small change, but a powerful symbol of our commitment to acknowledging everyone's work. The path to this point had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, particularly in the early days of my leadership, when some questioned whether an engineer could successfully transition to an executive role. I had made mistakes, learned from them, and grown stronger. The technical challenges I could handle confidently. The politics of leadership had been a steeper learning curve. In the orientation room, 12 new engineers waited expectantly. Looking at their diverse faces, I felt a surge of purpose. This was why I had accepted the CTO role rather than taking one of the many offers that had come my way. Here I could shape not just technology but the environment in which it was created. Welcome to Tech Fusion. I began setting aside my prepared notes. Let me tell you about the values that guide our work here and why acknowledging each person's contributions matters so deeply to us. I shared a condensed version of my story not to center myself but to illustrate the importance of integrity and recognition in our field. The new hires listened attentively, several nodding in recognition at parts of the tale. After the orientation, I returned to my office to find an email from Richard. The subject line read, "Board approved, next phase begins." We had received approval for my proposal to expand our security offerings based on my patented technology with a substantial research budget and hiring plan. The work ahead would be challenging but exhilarating. As I looked out my office window at the city skyline, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal had been painful, but it had led me to find my voice and claim my rightful place. More importantly, it had allowed me to create space for others who might have been silenced or sidelined in the old regime. The journey had taught me lessons I would never forget. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Document your work meticulously. Protect your innovations. And perhaps most importantly, stand firm in your truth even when facing powerful opposition. Marcus had thought my strength was just in my coding ability. He had underestimated my resilience, my foresight, and my courage. That was a common mistake in our industry, particularly with women in technical roles. We were often valued for specific skills, but not seen as leaders or visionaries. My story had become something of a legend in Silicon Valley. A cautionary tale for those who would underestimate a female engineer. The patent that had been my insurance policy was now the foundation of my legacy both financially and professionally. But the true value wasn't in the $69 million deal. It was in the changes I had been able to implement, the culture I was helping to build, and the doors I was opening for others. As the day came to a close, I gathered with my leadership team for our weekly strategy session. Looking around the table at these talented individuals, I felt a sense of pride in how far we had come. The security protocol that Marcus had tried to steal was now just one part of a comprehensive security strategy that would guide Tech Fusion into the future. Have you ever had your work stolen or been underestimated in your career? I hope my story gives you courage to stand up for yourself and document your contributions. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment telling me about a time you had to fight for recognition or what you would have done in my situation. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to vindication. Remember, sometimes the greatest success comes after the most painful challenges.